and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, IDEAS, with the support of Yayasan Sime Darby, recently launched a report of a 5-year project, a pilot project, which is aimed at building a more inclusive education model for Orang Asli children in Malaysia. Now, the report offers not just data, but deep insights drawn from the ground using participatory methods that actively involve parents and students and teachers and even Tok Batins. So today on the show we have two of the authors of the report, Dr Suria Selasih Angit, who is assistant professor at University of Nottingham, Malaysia's School of Education, and Durrah Sharifah Ahmad Azlan, who is a researcher at IDEAS. Both of you, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Dr Suria, can we talk a little bit about this project? Tell me about the pilot project, how it started, when it started, where it was done, and all those details.
Thank you, Melissa. And like you mentioned just now, the project started about 5 years ago, but the first 2 years were actually the initial studies that were conducted by a different group of researchers, and then we took over from the previous studies, and then the next 2.5 years, that's the one that is really where the implementation of the project happens. So basically the implementation of this pilot project was actually based on the 12 policy recommendations that were made by the IDEAS team, the first 2 studies, right?
Since 2020
since
and
2020.
Okay, so this is a really long project. So the first half was really just kind of getting a lay of the land and understanding and then coming up with the recommendations. And the second part was about how to implement these recommendations. Could you very briefly, Dr. Suria, talk to me about what it hoped to address? What was the objective of the project?
Okay, I think we are aware that Orang Asli students are underperforming, and there are a lot of educational issues or challenges that Orang Asli students are facing at the moment. Then oftentimes all these challenges are being framed within a very negative framing. So I think based on our prior studies and also the recent research, not only by IDEAS but by other researchers as well, we realized that we need to change this this narrative. We need it to be more strength-based, and also the 2 prior studies that IDEA conducted found that there is a dire need to actually look at the underlying challenges. So that's how we want to look at the underlying challenges, not the symptoms anymore. So that's why we decided that let's look at the strengths rather than the problems.
And IDEAS coming in to look at the underlying challenges, what was it that you were hoping to address through IDEAS?
I think continuing on the previous work done by IDEAS about how there's all the underlying challenges, how we should build more trust between Orang Asli and non-Orang Asli communities, as well as shifting the narrative to having it more strength-based. We are really trying to bridge the gap between policy recommendations and translating it into actual actions on the ground. So that's what we hope to achieve through these projects, and we hope that through the documentation of the processes, it could also act as a guide for any future stakeholders interested to do projects with the Orang Asli community.
Okay. Could you walk me through the different components? So there were a few phases, right? So talk to me about why you had these different perspectives, different angles.
I think the different components that we have, I guess most importantly was like what Dr. Suria mentioned, having these sessions, needs analysis with the community themselves, the Orang Asli students, parents, on teachers, on what are their hopes, aspirations and needs. Also including multi-stakeholders such as from the government, the bahagian pengurusan sekolah, the Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri, JAKOWA, which is a Jabatan Kemajuan Orang Asli, as well as other NGOs to ensure that our goals are all aligned. And also ensuring that we are utilizing Indigenous guided methodologies, and also building that capacity for the implementers to do these programs. And yes, the intention of having all this wider perspective is also related to how there's a lack of data. So it's important for us to get this lived experience from those who are on the field itself, in addition to really integrating what was mentioned by the NGOs on how there's a lack of coordination between different stakeholders. So that's why it's important for us to get all this wider perspective.
No, it's wonderful that you're kind of bringing everyone together. I want to talk to you about the Indigenous guided methodologies. And I think one of the reasons why I was so interested in the report was because it allowed for the voices of in the community to be heard. So why was it very important to center these methods in your research, and what do you think, what insights do you think they enabled that maybe might have been missed had other traditional research methods been used?
All right, just to emphasize on this, right? So at the moment we don't have the exact research method or indigenous method for the Orang Asli communities yet.
Okay.
So what we did was we adopted the research methods from overseas, from other indigenous communities, and one of the methods that we used was called sharing circles, and I think that this is a powerful tool to actually give a platform, or to let the indigenous community members, our Orang Asli community members in this case, to actually be active participants with meaningful participation. I think previously or currently even, the participation is quite limited to consultation. And yeah, I would like to highlight here that consulting the community members is not considered as being culturally responsive, or we have to go beyond consulting. So what this method enables us to do is actually to initiate this co-creation process. Of course, this project being a pilot project, it's not perfect, but we learned a lot from the process itself. So it was a learning journey for all of us, and community members included. And yeah, and I think it enabled us to really learn from each other. So to put ourselves in a different position and to sort of balance the power dynamics between the non-Orang Asli, the implementers, the so-called experts, and also invite the community members to be the experts, because we talk about inclusive education for the Orang Asli or for the indigenous students, and we don't really, no one has really clearly defined what inclusive education would look like for our Orang Asli communities. And then and who would know the local indigenous knowledge more than...
Yes, of course. So you want to hear what they are saying. And what were they saying? What did the Orang Asli parents and students and teachers, what did they tell you about what education means to them, what their definitions of successful outcomes are? Could you share?
I think our data also highlight a lot of this, and in our previous research, we did find that learning for the Orang Asli students, and in fact for all students these days, should go beyond the classroom measures, classroom assessment, right? So the Orang Asli parents and students that were involved in this project particularly, they look at education as a means for them to actually advance themselves and to actually attain this upward social mobility, to solve problems in the community. They see this, they see education beyond academic performance at school. They see this as a way for them to really solve problems in their community. Just to give you an example from the project, right? So from one of the projects, we had 2 micro-solution projects in this, the bigger projects, and we have 2 micro-solution projects. So these projects focus on building skills. So one is on robotics, right, implemented by our implementing partner, the university, Islamic University. So and the other one is they focus on the entrepreneurship. So that is by the University of Science Islam Malaysia. So what is interesting here is that students, our Orang Asli students, got the opportunity to learn skills that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to learn in normal classrooms, right? So then from the robotics group, they realized that, STEM, all right, STEM education could really open doors to them. And they even found, inspirations to actually learn how to solve the water issues in the community.
Through the project?
Through the project. And they're now really, it's still in the initial stage, of course, but, with the coding skills that they learned from the projects, they were eager to actually try to find a solution to their water issue, because this water issue sounds, it sounds like, okay, water issue, but this water issue has been, there forever, and that has been the source of a lot of challenges in school. So
it's one of the underlying barriers, right? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Access to kind of free-flowing clean water.
Correct.
I see.
Yeah. So it stopped them from attending schools. It stopped them from being fully prepared for school, and then not being able, in our needs analysis and our subsequent engagements with parents, these stories have, we heard these stories again and again. So when for example, a child doesn't have the opportunity to properly wash the uniform, it seems trivial to us, right? But then the child would go to school, not fully ready, not in a fully clean uniform, and then they get mocked, bullied by other friends, and that actually stopped them.
It's a negative experience for them, and they don't want to go back to school.
Yeah, and it perpetuates this misconception that saying Orang Asli children do not know how to take care of their hygiene, and whereas there is this underlying bigger underlying problem where they didn't have enough, they didn't have clean water source. Yeah. So
so the project actually gave them some hope, some ideas to solve these these perennial problems within their own villages. Yeah. It's wonderful. Durrah, what about you? When you, as part of putting together this report, what were the voices from the ground that you thought were quite interesting, that you thought maybe, this really highlights the differences of how Orang Asli parents and students themselves define inclusive education, separate from maybe mainstream expectations?
It's pretty much similar to what was mentioned by Dr. Suria just now, how their expectations of education is not really based on classroom or exams-based learning, but really more on experiential learning, one that inculcates their cultures and traditions, one that involves the environment more, and also that's something that any education future intervention should focus more on. Really integrating that cultural aspect. Yeah.
Both of you talked about the strength-based education, and I think that's important, right? So shifting towards a strength-based narrative, moving away from this deficit lens, if I understand you correctly, in the beginning, reframing the fact that Orang Asli are not marginalized victims. In fact, they are holders of knowledge and have profound strength. So when we think about strength-based, culturally a responsive education system for Orang Asli children, what would that look like in practice? Okay. Dr. Suria, it's a big question.
Okay. It's a big question, and I think since this is also our learning journey, based on our engagement, no one knows the full answer to that. Sure. But of course, for this system, for the education system to be fully responsive to the needs of Orang Asli students, we need to bring the Orang Asli communities, the parents, the community leaders, the students on board. Because then, like Durrah mentioned just now, the integration of the local knowledge, local culture and values, that is really important. But then who will know that better? And then unfortunately, in the communities, we are also losing our traditional knowledge because it has not been valued enough in the past, and now we've started to hear things like, indigenous practices are more sustainable, but in the past we were told that this is not valuable, and then we are losing that. So by actually inviting parents as active participants, all right,
co-creators.
So then we could actually learn together. We learn from them, and they, in the process, same in the project. In the process, the community members also, they had to do their homework. They, they became the resource person. So even though we focus on, transferable skills, like, 21st century skills, but they came together, they came in to bring the local knowledge. How could this be more related to the environment, to, whatever traditions and values that the Orang Asli, the local Orang Asli. I would like to...
Yes, that's a very good point. Dr.
Yeah, because there are 18 to 19 Orang Asli groups, right?
Orang Asli, indigenous peoples of Malaya and of Borneo are not homogeneous.
Right?
That's a really interesting point. If we want to talk about culturally responsive education, inclusive education, for a non-homogeneous indigenous group, how do we ensure that it does cover all includes everyone, leaves no one behind?
Okay, so indigenous communities globally share like some similarities. The struggles are similar. If you look at the ones in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, we share similar struggles, but maybe different degrees of, So in Malaysia, it's the same too. But the specific needs would differ according to the context, according to the groups, and also the locations. The geographical location is also an important factor here. So I think by having projects like this, for example, this project, right? So this provides some sort of a framework, like the broad guidelines of how to work with the communities.
So it doesn't need to be specific. It can just be as broad and then define it specifically for the needs.
So for future projects, for example, this project outlines the general guidelines, right? Like building trust and all that. That's at the heart of this project. But then before this could be, before this model could even be replicated or, applied in other contexts, another series of needs analysis need to be done, because then that, let's say now we focus on communities in Gua Musang, the Temia community in Gua Musang, right? So let's say if we want to move this to the Temuan community in Negeri Sembilan, for example, right? So the universal needs are there, but there are also specific needs. So the needs analysis part is actually important to really listen to the stories of the participating communities, our co-creators. That's an important part. In this project, we spent about 1 year talking to different stakeholders to really gain an understanding of what is really needed.
Wow. Yeah. So a year of really just listening. Listening. Can that be replicated? So the pilot is what has had its successes and has brought a lot of learning to this area, which, if I understand correctly, has a lot of gaps in knowledge. When you think about the next step, can this model be replicated? Can it be scaled to a certain degree? Durrah, Dr. Suria? Well, let's start Durrah. What did you think when you were thinking about next steps for this project?
In terms of replicability, maybe not each steps, but maybe just the elements of co-creation, something that should be replicated, especially with the involvement of the communities themselves, and really involving them in each steps of the process. So that's something that we hope can be replicated. And would you like to add anything?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, if we go back to the report, right, we launched 3 different reports. So the first report would actually be the best point of reference for the general framework, because that's where we documented our journey. So the more general, the learnings that we learned throughout the process, that's more general there. And then I think the overall model could be replicated, but for every step, especially the needs analysis, would be slightly different, because then the 1 year that we spent in Gua Musang, that stage should also be done in a different, because we highlighted in our project, we managed to, after speaking to different stakeholders, one of the top needs that was highlighted by the stakeholders is that to highlight the strengths and talents of Orang Asli students, right?
So the strength-based.
Yeah, and in other communities, there might be some
Something
other,
different.
So the overall structure, the overall format could be replicated, but then the needs, the specific needs has to be really, you know, be focusing on the specific group of.
Okay, so this is quite interesting. If we have, so this is this report, I hope is a launching point to more conversation, more research, and hopefully more policy action. What is it that you're hoping that people take away from this report? If you could, the one policy recommendation from your report that you think, let's do it now, let's do it tomorrow, let's do it yesterday. what would you say would create the most impact and is the most important, Dr. Suria?
Okay, to me, one of the, I think we table several recommendations, right? The one that I hope can be, you know, implemented as soon as possible is actually to strengthen the network that we, you know, the network was already there. The network, by network, I mean the different stakeholders, the funders,
the people that you mentioned in the beginning. Okay,
the implementers, schools, school leaders, teachers, and I think a lot of people are doing a lot of things at the same time, the same things as well.
Oh, there's overlap.
Yes, overlap, fragmented. Yeah. So each program will not have the full picture of everything, right? But then when we had our multi-stakeholder engagement, we could see, okay, Teach for Malaysia, for example, is doing this, and then Pemimpin GSL is doing this, Yayasan Gamuda is doing this, and then, you know, it's like piecing the puzzle together, right? So we have a more complete picture of that. So Ministry of Education has also really interesting and good programs, but then they are not together. And I think by you know, really strengthening this this network, it will help us to strengthen the intervention programs because we could learn from each other. We don't have to, you know, reinvent the wheel from scratch, right? And in fact, in this project, one of the outcomes that we are really happy about is the seed community, the establishment of the seed community of stakeholders in education, Orang Asli education. So we really hope that this seed community could be, you know, further strengthened. Because
what's the seed community? Could you elaborate, Durrah?
The seed community is a network of implementers, maybe NGOs, academicians who do work on the ground, funders included, in relation to Orang Asli education. So we hope through this seed community, perhaps there can be some sharings of related challenges, related advice and guidance, so that you don't have to start all over again. Can be some sharing of learnings.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything that you personally, the same question to you in terms of what policy you would like to see, Durrah? Anything specific?
I agree with Dr. Suria about there needing to be more coordination between different stakeholders. But at the same time, I feel that it's important to also address the systemic issues as well, because you see that the children, the parents are really passionate about the education and whatnot, but there's all these systemic barriers that hinders them from participating equally as like non-Orang Asli communities, such as maybe transportation issues, land issues, electricity and whatnot. And I feel that that's something very important to address first and foremost.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming on the show and sharing about the report, but also for all the hard work and heart and effort that's gone into this 5-year-long project. I hope that we get to see this inclusive education for our Orang Asli children. Thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.